Welcome to Beyond the Box. I'm Phil Lewin.
And I'm Nicole Allam.
Today, we're going to be talking all about geopolitics and their profound impact on supply chain, and especially supply chain resilience.
That's right, Phil. And it's not only manufacturers and value chain stakeholders talking about it. Suddenly, the whole world is trying to understand today's trade headlines and, more importantly, what it means for them.
That's right. And we're very fortunate to have two experts on global trade with us today to help unpack this very complex topic and maybe even give us a little peek into the future. What do you think, Nicole?
I'm not sure if they brought their crystal balls, but I think that we can definitely start by taking a look at where we are today. So I want to extend a very warm welcome to James Hookham, the Director of Global Shippers Forum, and Zera Zheng, the Global Head of Business Resilience and Consulting here at Maersk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
Thank you. And James, let's start with you. I know we're closing in on the midpoint of 2025, and I don't think anyone would have imagined the scale of disruption and uncertainty in the first half of the year. Do you think these trade frictions and uncertainty are sort of the new normal that people need to learn to cope with, or do you think things are going to settle down?
Well, the advice that I'm giving to shippers, importers and exporters, members of the Global Shippers Forum, is that they should be expecting this to continue for all sorts of reasons that perhaps we can get into. But the world just seems to be in a different paradigm at the moment with a succession of disruptions, not just geopolitical ones, but due to climate change and extreme weather events, industrial relations. I mean, heck, we started the year worrying about whether there would be a port strike on the east and Gulf coast of the US. Do you remember that? Well, but of course, since then, it has been US trade policy that has dominated. But underlying that, the world is still changing. And I am advising shippers to prepare accordingly. I don't think there is going to be a return to normality. I think we should be into this new mindset of compound disruption, where there's just one thing after another, and it does build on itself, a bit like interest rates, but not in a good way.
And Zera, you eat, drink, and breathe resilient. So I would love to hear your view on all of this. What are the main challenges that you foresee for the remainder of 2025?
Well, thanks for the questions. And yes, I do live and breathe resilience, and 2025 is certainly keeping us busy. I would say that the biggest things that will remain there is the U.S. tariff. The U.S. trade policies is also facing the constant change at this moment. While many often were still focused on the 90 days and suspensions for the reciprocal tariff, which is supposed to expire on July 9th. And now suddenly there is a new twist emergence on May 28th. As the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that certain tariffs under the IEPA, the Emergency Act, was unlawful. And of course, these tariff regulations and actually also has been asked by the court to resilient within 10 calendar days. So that's actually created some uncertainties to the shippers and also to the industries for sure. Then the second thing, I think that especially that we probably need to be mindful, also keep an eye on, is the U.S. regulations on the Chinese and made or operator vessels. Also, this is related to the regulation that has been announced early in April this year. So actually starting from the October 14th, there will be a new port services fee applied to these vessels and either built in China or operated by the Chinese entities. That's under the Sanction 301. So actually for this one, is also expected to have additional cost is to range from $120 in this year to $250 per containers and by 2028. So, which also means that it could be important for us to all watch out how the industry will respond to that. So, for example, whether the additional cost will be passed on to the shippers, or whether the networks will be adjusted to limit the deployment of these Chinese-built vessels on the U.S. trade lanes. So again, another uncertainty. The third ones, also I would recommend it that for all the shippers, all the industries and supply chain leaders and need to watch out is related to the weather. Although this year the overall weather patterns actually appears quite milder than the past 2 years, but still certain regions and also certain risk still need a closer attention. For example, so like Europe is already seeing worse than average conditions on the Rhine River. So March 2025 is also the warmest on record, with low water levels now occurring months earlier than usual. We also anticipated that this year it will be warmer and drier in Europe, and that also means that there's an increasing wildfire risk, especially in the areas that had such cases before, like Portugal, Greece, Spain, and Italy. And on top of that, the U.S. and NOAA also forecasting a highly active Atlantic hurricane season for this year, especially that they anticipate 19 named storms, including 3 to 5 will be developed into major hurricanes. So you can see actually for the rest of 2025, I would say there's still quite a lot of uncertainties. And of course, all while keeping a close eye on the global flashpoints like the ongoing Red Sea situation and also the conflict in Ukraine.
James, as the director of the Global Shippers Forum, you interact with multiple logistics stakeholders. And I'm wondering what trends you see in the way that shippers are responding to the current situation. Are they taking a wait and see approach, or are more companies being proactive and actually rewiring their supply chains?
Well, they're having to take a wait and see approach on certain topics just because of uncertainty about where announcements will finally land. But again, the advice that GSF is offering to shippers, importers in particular, in that situation is you're going to need more people to help you out here. This is not business as usual. You're going to need, first of all, to understand some possibly quite complex new decisions. You're going to need to evaluate the impact on your inventory and possibly on your wider business. And then you're going to need some real help on the ground to communicate that. You've got customers to talk to, you've got suppliers to talk to, and most importantly, you've got the rest of the business to keep informed, because you're on the front line here. So you need to be able to communicate the implications of some of these headline announcements to the rest of your business. And then when you've got yourself a plan together, whatever that may be, you're going to need to execute it and probably troubleshoot it, because as a world famous boxer said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's what's happening to shippers at the moment. So there are ways of doing stuff while you're waiting, if you like, for the actual picture to become clear. And this isn't just about the issue of tariffs and so on. You're going to need these capacity and these resources in place to handle the disrupted arrivals because of weather events, because of labor disputes, because of conflicts and military tensions and so on. So again, if you accept that this is the future we're looking at, then you probably need to get that additional resource in. One of the things that I think is really encouraging, and I'm really pleased to be involved in this podcast, is because I do see carriers leaning in to this business and looking to work with their customers, because shippers are so reliant on the kind of information that Zera has been describing to help them make those evaluations and to pass on that information down the chain and into their business. So we're in this together, and I think this is a great example of how we could and should be cooperating.
A colleague of ours likes to say, trade like water will find a way. And I'm wondering how you would respond to that, given the uncertainty that you've said, the people in the Global Shippers Forum and the different logistics stakeholders that you work with. Do you agree? Will trade like water find a way eventually?
Absolutely find a way. It will find a level as well. So when the tariff rates are crystallized, and let's not forget, there may well be reciprocal tariffs from other trading nations, as some of them are threatened. So there will be new costs of end costs for many goods. And then the laws of supply and demand will kick in, and we will see a new datum likely to be achieved. And that may be less than what we do now. It's unlikely to be more in that scenario, but it could well be goods then destined for other markets. So if certain markets become closed or unattractive, then as we've already seen, the new opportunities are being sought in other markets with perhaps lower tariffs or more friendly approaches. So yes, that's a really good analogy. It will not only find a way, it will find a level. And that's what I think we're all trying to understand, where that level might be right at the moment.
And Zera, I know we're hearing a lot of terms these days like whiplash or fatigue from all this change and pressure. Some of our customers, are we advising them to kind of take a wait and see approach, or to be more proactive and already start rewiring or rethinking their manufacturing footprint and their supply chains? Maybe you can talk a little about that.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. And actually, we will not ask or advise our customers just to wait and see. I think more important is you still, before even there's uncertainties and for the crisis, but still there's something for the business you can do it now. For example, the first thing, and also we see is a quite effective one, is ensure that you have a timely risk visibility and insight. This means that you suddenly have the capability to pick up these early warnings and signals, not just reading these headlines and after the disruptions happen. So this is also to help a business to really stay ahead of the curve, get the right information at the right time, and more importantly, turning that into some actionable insight. Here, actually, I want to highlight a bit is we are talking about the insight, not just the information. Because information could be just the news, then it's just to create the awareness. But the insight is really support and the decision and the response. I hope that the business, even you decided to wait and see, it's after you evaluate all the scenario, all the potential impact, rather than you have no choices, then have to wait and see. The second things I think business also can do is for the scenario planning. As I mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty, and also, Nicole, you say that actually there's no crystal balls here. I fully agree, and for none of us actually can predict 100% what is doomed to happen in the next second. But what we can do, at least, to start to think about, okay, what is likely to happen? What is a plausible scenarios that could happen? Then at least you can, based on these plausible scenarios, start planning and be prepared that what actions you can probably take before these disruptions before these scenarios really materialize. This is also will give you additional time when the things really happens, and then help you to accelerate your response. Remember, time buys options. So it's important that you have the time to really allows you to act faster and make a faster, smarter decisions than your competitor. This will give you the special advantage in times of a crisis. So at least these are two things I would advise our customers and could consider to implement it, and also even consider to incorporate in their supply chain strategy and the resilience planning in general.
I love what you said, Zera. Time buys options, and I think I need to remember that in my own thinking life. But
Absolutely.
yeah. And Phil, we've been talking a lot about digital integration in supply chains recently, and hoping, and this question will go to both of you, but perhaps we'll start with Zera. Could you talk about some of the opportunities to use some of the massive amounts of data that are already in the system that can help improve resilience? And perhaps you have an example you could share.
Yes. Well, with the amount of data that's already available in the supply chain, there's actually some real opportunities to really improve the resilience, like you mentioned, not just through the visibility itself, but also through the better predictions of the risk and impact. Since my job is more focusing on the supply chain risk and also the resilience work, so here I would like to give some examples is and how we use these historical disruptions in data to forecast the potential impact of the situations like a typhoon, cyclone, which is a very common ones, how these things hit the port and impact the port. So we've analyzed the past events and also found out on average, ports in China, for example, so if they being hit by these cyclone or typhoon situations, it takes around 3.4 days to recover. And for the US ports, around 4.6 days. And if it's unfortunately hit Bangladesh, the Chittagong port, it can take over 6 days due to the post-event congestions. So having this kind of a date actually allows the supply chain teams, the supply chain leaders, and to better estimate the disruption durations more accurately, and also to anticipate the lead time delays and helping them to adjust their plans earlier before the full impact hits. So it's not just about, the tracking the storm itself. It's about how you use the data to ask, what does that mean for my cargo, for my timelines, and also for my options? That's also where the data can be a real driver for the resilience.
And James, to you, because I know especially sometimes with all the stakeholders in the value chain, sharing data isn't always smooth or available. Maybe you can talk a little from your stakeholder perspective.
Well, digitalisation generally and sharing of data between parties is clearly a very hot topic anyway in the industry because of all the advances and opportunities technology is offering. But I'm certainly advising shippers to revisit their business case to go digital if they haven't already, simply because of the advantages it offers during times of disruption. And the recommendation is that they actually evaluate the business case, not on a business as usual basis, but as a business under crisis. Because if you go back to the beginning, we assume that these disruptions are likely to continue, then the challenge of tracking your inventory in its extended supply chain is only going to become more challenging and more necessary and urgent. So the kinds of analysis and insights that Zera was describing are just the kinds of inputs that businesses are looking for so that they can update their forecasts and estimates. They can update their advice to their customers and keep them informed as to the arrival and availability of the goods that they're expecting. And that's really the kind of challenges and needs of managing a supply chain under disruption. So digitalization in its most general sense, I see as being a huge ingredient into how you manage this going forward. And of course, there's all sorts of different applications and ways in which that can be implemented, but just getting connected and plugged in is often quite a significant challenge in a business because of all the data and cybersecurity issues, compatibility and interoperability, all of that. So it's not something you can just sort of come in on a Monday morning and decide you want to do. And if you accept the premise that we are going to be living in more disrupted times, then you probably ought to start that planning process now, if you haven't already, and start to look at it through that prism rather than perhaps what you're more used to.
Well, thank you. This has been an interesting discussion. And, shipping used to be something people only talked about if there was a big strike or a delay in holiday gifts. And now it's something everyone's talking about at their kitchen table. And I think it's obvious this conversation is going to go on a while. So really special thanks to James and Zera for joining us and sharing all your great insights today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon for another exciting conversation, including covering some of the topics that James and Zera talked about today.
And until next time, thanks for listening.